There is a moment in geopolitics when a handshake changes history, not because of who is shaking hands, but because of who is left standing outside the room. For the last 70 years, the border between the United States and Canada was not just a line on a map, it was invisible. It was the longest undefended border in the world, a symbol of two nations that operated as a single breathing organism when it came to defense. If a missile was tracked over the Arctic, it wasn't an American radar or a Canadian radar seeing it, it was NORAD. It was us. One team, one shield. That psychological certainty, that absolute belief that North America is a fortress under a single command, has just been shattered. What I am looking at right now isn't just a diplomatic disagreement. It isn't a trade dispute over lumber or milk. It is the beginning of a divorce. And like all divorces involving immense power and deep secrets, it is turning ugly faster than anyone predicted. The headlines you are seeing are talking about submarines. They are talking about a procurement deal where Canada decided to buy new fleets from Germany and South Korea instead of the United States. If you look at that surface level news, you might think this is just business. You might think Prime Minister Mark Carney just found a better price tag. You would be wrong. This is not about money. This is about loyalty. And the man sitting in the Oval Office, Donald Trump, has taken this move as a personal, strategic insult. We are watching the activation of what is being called the Safe Pact, security action for Europe. But in Washington, they are calling it something else. They are calling it the Great Betrayal. Canada has effectively signaled that it no longer trusts the United States to be its primary security guarantor. Ottawa is hedging its bets. They are plugging their military nervous system into Brussels instead of Washington. And the consequences of this pivot are going to be felt by every single person who relies on the stability of the North American continent. Let's be very clear about what just happened in the middle of the night. At 3:00 a.m., a message went out on Truth Social that set the tone for the chaos we are now watching unfold. Trump didn't use diplomatic language. He didn't ask for a meeting. He called Canada a security risk. He explicitly linked the protection of NORAD to this new European pivot. The message was brutal. If you want to buy European hardware, you don't get American intelligence. Good luck. That phrase, good luck, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. It implies that without the American umbrella, Canada is naked in the Arctic, and the terrifying reality is that he is right. But to understand why the reaction is this visceral, why the Pentagon is reportedly in a state of panic and fury, you have to look at the mechanics of the deal itself. This isn't just about buying ships. Canada is legally joining the European Union's PESCO project for military mobility. This is the gateway. In the past, this was framed as a logistical agreement, a way to move troops around, but the SAFE Pact weaponizes that framework. By prioritizing interoperability with Europe, Canada is legally binding its military future to the European continent. When you sign a defense contract for submarines that will last 40 years, you aren't just buying steel. You are buying a marriage. You are agreeing to share data, training, maintenance, and secrets for half a century. Canada has chosen the German and Korean industrial base over the American one. They have looked at the United States, looked at the volatility of American politics, and decided that Europe is a safer bet. But here is where the story gets dark. This isn't just a political pivot, it is a technical suicide mission. The United States military is not designed to play nice with others unless it controls the game. We have to talk about the F-35. This is the single most advanced piece of military technology in history, and Canada's Air Force relies on it. But the F-35 isn't just a jet, it's a flying computer. It runs on a system called ALIS and later Odin. This is a proprietary logistical software that connects every single F-35 in the world back to the servers in the United States. Think of it like an iPhone. If Apple decides to stop sending you updates, your phone eventually becomes a brick. It stops working. The United States controls that switch for the Canadian Air Force. If the Trump administration decides that Canada's new integration with Europe poses a risk, if they argue that European software on Canadian systems could leak American stealth data, they can invoke ITAR. That stands for International Traffic in Arms Regulations. It is the most powerful legal weapon in the American arsenal. They don't have to sanction Canada. They don't have to declare war. All they have to do is stop the software updates. Within 48 hours, the Canadian F-35 fleet could be grounded, not shot down, but locked out. Pilots would climb into the cockpits, the systems would fail to authenticate, and the jets would not fly. This is the hidden danger that almost nobody is talking about. By trying to diversify away from the US, Canada has exposed its jugular vein. The retaliation won't be diplomatic, it will be digital. Now you might ask, why would Mark Carney take this risk? Why poke the bear? The answer lies in the deep insecurity that has taken over Ottawa. They looked at the numbers, they looked at the polling. They saw a United States that is becoming increasingly isolationist, increasingly transactional. Trump has made it clear that alliances are not sacred. They are rental agreements. If you don't pay the rent, you don't get the protection. Canada has been a chronic underspender on defense for decades. They are the freeloaders that Trump complains about. Carney and his strategists likely calculated that the U.S. security guarantee is expiring. They believe that eventually the Americans will pull back, so they hit the panic button. They went to Europe. They went to the Germans and said, build us submarines. They went to the Koreans and said, build us a fleet. They are trying to build a lifeboat because they think the American ship is sinking, but in doing so, they have accelerated the very thing they were afraid of. They created a self-fulfilling prophecy. By acting like the U.S. is an unreliable partner, they have made the U.S. into a hostile adversary. This hostility is already bleeding into the economy. And this is where it affects the average citizen, not just the generals. For decades, Canada and the U.S. have operated under a unique industrial agreement called the National Technology Industrial Base, or NTIB. It's a boring acronym that means everything. It effectively treats Canada as the 51st state for military production. A factory in Ontario can sell parts to the U.S. Army just as easily as a factory in Ohio. It is a seamless border for bullets, steel, and chips. Trump has ordered a review of this status. That review is the economic equivalent of a nuclear bomb. If Canada is kicked out of the NTIB, every single screw, every circuit board, every piece of aluminum that crosses the border for defense purposes will need a license. It introduces red tape where there used to be a fast lane. The Canadian defense sector generates billions of dollars and employs tens of thousands of highly skilled workers. If that 51st state status is revoked, that industry dies overnight. We are already seeing the early signs of this soft blockade. Reports are coming in from the border that shipments of dual-use technology, things like advanced sensors and microchips that can be used for both civilian and military purposes, are being slow-rolled by U.S. Customs. Trucks are sitting in inspection bays for days instead of hours. This is how a superpower squeezes a smaller neighbor. They don't have to announce a blockade. They just stop stamping the paperwork. They let the inventory rot in the warehouse. They let the contracts expire. It is a strangulation by bureaucracy. The irony here is tragic. Canada is trying to buy submarines to protect its sovereignty in the Arctic. The Arctic is the next great battleground. Russia is building bases there. China is declaring itself a near-Arctic state. The ice is melting, opening up shipping lanes that everyone wants to control. Canada needs those submarines desperately. But by choosing German and Korean designs, they have alienated the only power that can actually help them hold that territory. The German submarines are excellent machines. The Korean shipyards are incredibly fast. But neither Germany nor Korea can project power into the Canadian North. If a crisis happens in the Arctic Circle next year, Berlin is not sending a carrier strike group. Seoul is not sending Marines. The only country that can project force into the high north is the United States. And the United States is now looking at Canada and asking, whose side are you on? This is the failure of the safe strategy. It relies on a Europe that is thousands of miles away while antagonizing a superpower that shares a 3,000-mile border. It creates a disconnect between geography and strategy. Canada is physically attached to North America, but politically trying to attach itself to Brussels. Geopolitics, in the end, is about maps. And the map says you cannot defend Canada without the United States. Let's go deeper into the submarine deal itself, because the technical details reveal the depth of the split. The U.S. Navy runs entirely on nuclear power. Their submarines can stay underwater for months, moving fast and deep. Canada, however, insisted on diesel-electric boats. They argued they didn't have the infrastructure for nuclear. That is a valid point, but it created a binary choice. The U.S. doesn't build diesel subs anymore, so Canada had to go abroad. But there was a way to handle this diplomatically. There was a way to buy foreign hulls, but stuff them with American combat systems, American weapons, American sensors. That would have kept the interoperability alive. It would have kept the data link open. Instead, the reports suggest that the SAFE Pact favors a sovereign European solution. That means European combat systems, European encryption, European sensors. This is the red line for the Pentagon. They cannot allow a European sensor network to plug directly into the heart of NORAD. If that German submarine detects a Russian missile, how does it talk to the American headquarters in Colorado Springs? Does it use American codes, or does it use a European standard? If it uses a European standard, the Americans have to build a bridge to translate the data. And in the world of intelligence, a bridge is just another word for a leak. The NSA, the CIA, the Pentagon, they are paranoid by nature. They will not accept a data feed that they do not control. So the result is a blind spot. If Canada proceeds with this, we could see a fracturing of NORAD. We could see the United States setting up its own independent sensor line along the Canadian border, effectively treating Canada as a buffer zone rather than a partner. Imagine that reality. The US military pointing its sensors north at Canada, not to watch the Canadians, but because they can no longer trust the Canadians to watch the sky for them. It is a total reversal of 70 years of defense policy. And what about the domestic fallout? Prime Minister Carney is trying to sell this as a victory for Canadian independence. He is framing it as standing up to a bully, diversifying the supply chain, and creating jobs. And to a certain extent, that narrative works. There is a lot of anxiety about Trump in Canada. There is a desire to not be dependent on the whims of the White House. But independence carries a price tag. The rumors coming out of Trump's camp suggest that the protection premium is real. If Canada wants to stay under the American nuclear umbrella while buying European gear, Trump is going to ask for a check, a direct transfer, billions of dollars annually paid to the U.S. Treasury as a fee for defense services. It sounds like a mafia shakedown, but in the transactional worldview of the current administration, it is perfectly logical. You want the service? You pay the subscription fee. This puts the Canadian government in an impossible bind. If they pay the fee, they look weak. They admit that they are a vassal state paying tribute. If they refuse to pay, Trump could pull the plug on NORAD cooperation, leaving the country vulnerable. And all the while, the F-35 kill switch hangs over their heads like a sword. We also have to consider the timing. This is happening while the world is on fire. Tensions in the Pacific are rising. The war in Europe is grinding on, the Arctic is melting. This is the worst possible moment for the North American alliance to crack. A unified North America is the bedrock of Western security. If that bedrock cracks, the tremors are felt in Taiwan, in Ukraine, in the Baltics. Adversaries like Russia and China are watching this feud with absolute delight. They love the idea of Canada and the US fighting over software codes and tariffs, while the Arctic opens up for the taking. The SAFE Pact was supposed to make Canada safer. It's in the name. But by ignoring the geopolitical reality of its location, by ignoring the vindictive nature of the current U.S. administration, and by underestimating the technical stranglehold the U.S. has on its military, Canada may have done the opposite. They have walked into a trap. Let's look at the timeline of what happens next. The furious reaction from the White House is just the opening salvo. The next step is the bureaucratic strangulation I mentioned, the NTIB review. We will see defense contractors in Canada screaming for help as their orders are canceled. We will see layoffs in the aerospace sector. Then we will see the political pressure mount. The U.S. defense giants, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, are not going to take this lying down. They just lost a customer for life. A submarine fleet is a 40-year relationship. They are losing hundreds of billions of dollars. They will lobby the White House to punish Canada, to make an example of them so that no other ally thinks about switching to European suppliers. They will push for Section 232 tariffs on aluminum and titanium, claiming that Canadian materials are a national security risk. It sounds absurd. How can Canadian aluminum be a risk? But the legal argument will be that if Canada is not part of the trusted industrial base, then its raw materials are foreign and unreliable. Carney will try to rally the Europeans. He will try to get Brussels to issue statements of support. But let's be honest, what can Europe actually do? Can they replace the US market for Canadian goods? No. Can they replace the US military umbrella? No. Europe is struggling to defend itself. They cannot defend Canada too. The promise of the SAFE Pact is a mirage. It offers legal frameworks and interoperability, but it does not offer hard power. The tragedy of this situation is that it was avoidable. The US could have offered a better deal. Canada could have been more transparent about its needs, but we are past the point of negotiation. The ink is dry on the SAFE Pact. The decision to go with German and Korean subs has been signaled. The bridge has been burned. Now we are just waiting to see how fast the fire spreads. The scariest part of this entire scenario is the speed. In the old days, alliances fell apart over decades. Today, with software-defined warfare and instant economic retaliation, a 70-year alliance can unravel in 70 hours. The trust that took generations to build is evaporating in real time. I want you to think about the pilot sitting on the tarmac in Cold Lake or Baggetville right now. They are sitting in a jet that talks to satellites owned by a foreign power. They are defending a border that their neighbor no longer respects. They are the tip of the spear, but the shaft of the spear is fracturing in their hands. This is the new reality of the multipolar world. It isn't just about East versus West anymore. It's about the fracturing of the West itself. It's about the realization that national interests are diverging so sharply that even neighbors, even brothers, can turn into rivals. Canada wanted to be a global player. They wanted to show that they have options. They wanted to prove they aren't just a satellite of the United States. They have certainly proven that. But in the process, they might have just signed their own warrant for isolation. As we watch the rhetoric escalate, as we watch the tariffs likely come down and the software updates potentially stop, we have to ask, was it worth it? Is the promise of a European alliance worth the cost of an American enemy? Because that is what Canada is facing. Not a disappointed friend, but a hostile neighbor. And in geopolitics, geography is destiny. You can choose your friends, you can choose your allies, but you cannot choose your neighbors. The coming months will determine if this is a temporary spat or a permanent break. If the F-35s are grounded, even for a day, the trust will never return. If the data sharing stops, the shield over North America is gone. We are walking into a future where the map looks the same, but the power dynamics have completely shifted. The silence from the north is about to be broken by the sound of a closing door. And once that door shuts, I am not sure it can ever be opened again. The safe bet was always unity. The safe pact chose divergence. Now we all have to live with the risk.